Thanks, Ian, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Renee. I lead the M&A and activism practice as well as the ESG practice at FTI Consulting. And I'm really happy to be here and to be able to share some insights in the intersection between ESG considerations and stakeholder and shareholder activism. It's an area that we are seeing increasing activity and having outcomes that are related to corporate activity both here in Australia as well as globally. I hope I can work this. So when we looked at the MarketMeter survey results, it was interesting but unsurprising to see that governance is the one part of ESG that's always considered when evaluating a company's performance. But what I did find surprising in the research is that there's a contradiction in the responses, I thought, with around 70% of the surveyed investors stating ESG had not factored into their rationale for divestments. But then they said that governance is considered a key driver of divestment decisions. In fact, effectiveness of the board was rated by investors as the most important ESG factor. So what that says to me, is that much of the focus around ESG has been on the E, the environmental aspects such as climate change and carbon emissions. So when investors are sometimes asked these questions about ESG, they're skewed towards the environment and thinking less about social and governance. However, as we just heard from David, social issues such as modern slavery and supply chain ethics are very much business risks that impact a company's reputation, operational viability, and ultimately shareholder value. And on governance, it's often an area that's considered very well covered because the goalposts, I'll just move forward, because the goalposts of what good looks like have been clear for many years, and subsequently, there's consideration this might be an area that requires less focus because we've been focusing on it for a long time and maybe we've got it right, but not so. We've seen the consequences of poor governance continue to play out, including recently with the notable examples of WiseTech and MinRes, with each suffering short-term hit to share price and potentially long-term reputational damage. So what do we think 2025 holds? With the incoming mandatory climate reporting, there will be heightened scrutiny over a company's climate disclosures, of course, and what's different now is that information will be clearly linked to performance and future prospects. It's also worth noting the challenging dynamic we are likely to see as 2030 comes into sharper focus for companies, and some may need to pull back on their commitments, redefine their sustainability strategies, and in some cases, this may also lead to regulatory, legal, and reputational issues as the company manages their way through the change of situation. With increased scrutiny and dislocation of expectations often comes increased possibility for activist activity, and we typically see three triggers for when these arise. Firstly, a company with strong connection to climate change or the transition to net zero economy. Second, where we see there's a lack of a defined strategy or direction on critical ESG issues, or a failing to meet previous ESG commitments without clear expectations. And finally, the uncovering of a governance or social breach or high-profile brand issue is a red flag likely to invite shareholder or activist attention. So what then can a company do to prepare for heightened activism risk? Firstly, just as in any activism preparation, companies need to set a clear strategy, and this now must include a clear sustainability strategy that is linked to the business objectives. Second, understand the investment thesis of your business. Environment, social, and governance issues will be part of that thesis. The question is, do you understand what elements of most material to your investors? Have you provided enough substantial information and disclosures and clarity of direction to support their investment thesis? And finally, consider the impact of your business on broader stakeholder groups. MarketMeter's research found that 60% of board members believe companies should take all stakeholders into account in their decision making. I actually find that quite a low percentage, and I think that is very likely to increase in the future, because in my experience, companies and boards that consider all stakeholders and keep them informed and engaged not only protect the company's reputation, but it also secures your long-term social license to operate. A strong and substantiated equity story is strengthened when it encompasses a strong and substantiated sustainability story. Thank you, and I'll now hand over to Hans Lee.